I'll just get right into it then. So, as I said, I work at the Office of Research Support, and that is headed by Cheryl K. Green, who's the Associate Provost for Research, and my colleagues Candace Grouse and Emily Springer, who work in post-award. So that's if a grant is received, they handle the management and administration of the grant, along with their colleagues Ebony Ayala and Amber French. Kevin Collins is our Director of Human Research Protection Program. So he handles a lot of compliance and research integrity uh, items for faculty members who are working with human subjects research. So my side of the office, as I said before, I work with finding funding sources, and then once a faculty member has identified a funding opportunity they want to apply for, I do a consultation usually. I put together a checklist, work on the faculty member with the budget to make sure it aligns with university guidelines. And then I'm available to review drafts. If you have a draft of an application form that you'd like to share with me before the deadline, I'm happy to take a look at it too. And then I submit applications to federal funders. So if it's if it's an award that is um, uh, made from a federal funder, that has to be submitted through the new school, because those awards are given to institutions as a whole. So that's an important piece of what our office does as well. Also do outreach. So these workshops, the Grant Writing Institute that we have in the spring, as well as individual PI consultations, research office hours, that kind of thing. Basically available anytime you have a question about a possible grant opportunity you might be interested in. So the post-award team manages activities with the sponsor, manages reports, financial or otherwise, programmatic, answers questions about eligible costs, expenses, monitors compensation reports, and reviews compensation reports for compliance with university policy. They also facilitate the review of compensation reports with the Dean's Budget Office, executes cost transfers, manages payroll, and retains supporting compensation documentation. So starting from the broadest possible perspective, what is a grant? So a grant is a contract to perform work that advances the funder's mission. The grant maker pays the grantee to produce something of value for the grant making organization, whether that's a change in the world, a solution to a problem, a service to the community, a new or better way to accomplish something, or like publicity, basically enhanced reputation for the funder. So a grant is a transaction in which the grant maker pays for a product or result. So public and private entities make grants to nonprofit recipients. Our office works mostly with public grant makers, so that's federal government agencies like the National Endowment for the Arts, National Endowment for the Humanities, National Institutes of Health, National Science Foundation. There's also state government agencies and local governments. So like NISCA, the New York State Council for the Arts, or local funders like the Department of Culture, that kind of thing. So public grant makers provide funding as authorized by lawmakers to benefit the public. There's also private grant makers like foundations, corporations, associations, and private grant makers provide funding to projects of specific interest to the organization. And that private foundations are handled with by our colleagues in Udaro, in the foundation relations team. So there's different types of grants. There's formula or statutory grants, which are not competitive. Recipients generally determined by lawmakers. So those are things like city council discretionary funding. Then there's also cooperative agreements, which are competitive. The funder has to be involved in the implementation. There's also discretionary grants that are made that are competitive grants. So those will be most of the grants that we'll be discussing today. And there's also private funding types like donations, gifts, which are no strings attached, or contract-based grants, which have sort of obligations of varying complexity. So the grant funding process or grant cycle starts with a great idea. Then you find funders for that idea. You build a concept, sell the concept to the funding agency, make a formal application, and if it's successful, you get the award, do the work, and then prepare for future funding. So the details and emphasis of the process vary across funding types, funder types. The stages of the grant lifecycle are basically the pre-award phase, which where the funding opportunity is announced, the application is reviewed, the award phase, where the award decisions and notifications are made, and then the post-award phase, where the work is done, there's reporting, and then the closeout of the award. So laying the groundwork for successful grant seeking is an important part of the process. So before you even start writing your grant, you need to start with the project idea, something that's very clear, something that is, can be sold to the funder, something that's going to be very legible to them. And basically it's what do you want to do? What is your project? What are your interests? What kind of project do you need to do to conduct the work that you're interested in doing? And then you should look at one or more target funders to start out. So who are the grant makers working in your area of focus? If it's, if you're doing a creative project, is it somebody like the National Endowment for the Arts? Is it the New York State Council for the Arts? Something like that. If it's in the humanities, is it the National Endowment for the Humanities? If it's science or psychology, social sciences, is there some opportunity at the National Science Foundation, something like that, that's available? So then once you have sort of, conceived of your project, you have to have the ability to sell that to the funder. So your grant concept has to include a clear product that's relevant to the funder's interests and priorities, and also impactful and exciting in the context of your field. You also have to have a logical plan to conduct the research or the project, a basic sketch of how you'll get from A to B, and answers to questions about feasibility. So, if you have a strong concept, it'll make the funder say, let's do this. This person has thought through why this project is important and how they're going to do it. And that will sort of make it more persuasive and make it more likely to be funded. So the concept stage is key. Grants are discrete projects judged on their structure and coherence. If you clearly define your project's parameters before beginning the grant development process, you will increase your chances of grant success. So if you have a project that is going to involve like an exhibition, a dance performance, a journal article, and also, a monograph, that can be sort of difficult to sell to a funder. Like it's helpful to kind of focus on one area of the project that is sort of a clear, defined, discrete project. So if you have to, if part of it is having a conference or to gather material or to share ideas with colleagues, that could be one thing to focus on. Or if it's a research trip to do some archival research someplace else, that's another thing to focus on. Sort of making sure that the activity is discrete and that the output is kind of clear and aligns with what the project is going to do. So with a clearly defined project, you're more likely to pursue appropriate funding opportunities, develop strong grant proposals, and implement an effective grant-funded project. So really taking the time to think through your project at the outset can save you a significant amount of time in the long term. So you want to align the concept to a gap in the field. So, what is the key gap in knowledge and programs and tools and services in your field that your project will address? How will you address the gap? What specific results of your work will fill the gap? How is this work different from work already underway? What concrete impact will your work have on the field? So really it's about kind of being aware of what's happening in your discipline, and uh, making sure that a grant project that you propose is not sort of being duplicated. Um, Another way of phrasing it is sort of like, how does this build on work that's already happening in the field, and kind of expand what's happening? That's another way to kind of look at it. Um, and so for the product, your goal, you want to articulate an overarching goal that shows how your work will fill the gap in the field. So it's going to be presented differently in different fields. To fill a gap in knowledge, you want to articulate a clear, specific research question. To fill another kind of gap, you want to articulate the intended impact and the product that will make that will lead to that impact. And always make sure that the achievement of the goal will lead directly to filling the identified gap in the field. So the goal should be interesting and exciting to those knowledgeable about your field, because likely those will be the folks who are going to be reviewing it. That's not necessarily the case, but at least, for example, like with the National Endowment for the Humanities, it's going to be folks taken from across the humanities. Uh, it's not to say that they're necessarily going to have knowledge of your field, but they'll likely be familiar with sort of the general landscape of the discipline. So great grant ideas are high impact. With your field's key gaps in mind, ask, if I fill this gap, what would the impact be on my own work? What would the impact be on my students? What would the impact be on the field? What would be the impact on society? So you want to think about your project in light of the impact it's going to make on all those different areas. So once you have a concept, you need to fill it to funders. So many funders prefer to provide feedback and help guide the project development process well in advance of proposal submission. I think that's usually true for public funders. The program officers want you to get in touch with them. In many cases, you can begin to sell your project to the funder before you even submit the proposal by reaching out to that program officer. So while the proposal provides details and allows for a thorough review, the full proposal will ideally not be the first time a funder hears about your project. So selling your concept takes time and effort, saves time and effort, and makes you more competitive ultimately. So to introduce your project to smaller funders, you want to kind of keep it pretty short and sweet. So create a 1 to 2 page document or a 3-page document that includes the following sections: a summary of the work, the need for the work, the goals and the objectives of the project, the activities, the impact, and your qualifications to run the research. So that kind of concept paper can be used as a basis for a letter of inquiry or as a starting point for outreach to the program staff at the funding agency. So do your outreach. Program staff influence and guide funding decisions. They're often peers in the field. You can think of them as controlling a portfolio of investments, and you're sort of trying to receive part of that funding. They're making investments in the field through your work. They guide applicants to more suitable divisions or funding opportunities if their program or their funding opportunity is not the correct one. They're the definitive resource for information on alignment and competitiveness. And they also make funding recommendations and decisions. So evidence suggests that the majority of funded proposals involve early and substantial contacts with the program staff. So if you're going to contract a program officer at a large funding agency like the National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health, National Endowment for the Humanities, National Endowment for the Arts, you want to know the goals and focus of the agency, and then also the kind of subcategories, the directorate if it's at the NSF, and then the particular funding mechanism or grant program. So don't go in there sort of asking simple or basic questions that you could sort of get information on through Googling, what the sociology directorate does, or at the NSF. You want to articulate how your project will advance the goals of that agency or directorate or program. And then contact the program officer by email or by phone. If you want to email them, you should sort of summarize the proposed research to facilitate their feedback. If they have a requirement for like a project summary or a specific aims statement, be sure to include that. And then solicit feedback regarding the alignment and competitiveness of your project. So this is critical to really refining your project and pre-proposal development, because you can sort of convey the merits of your research, and if you have sort of the institutional backing secured for your project, like if your dean is on board, if you have support from the provost, that you can sort of show your qualifications that way. You can also establish a rapport and gain insights and kind of familiarize the program officer with the project. So here's a sample email. I'll share the slides after this presentation. If you are interested in sort of adapting this, you can also just reach out to me if you'd like. But basically you say, I'm interested in submitting a proposal for this program. I'd like to schedule a call, discuss whether my research is appropriate, explain what the work is. I can offer to share more information if they'd like to review it before the call, and then provide some possible times when you could meet with them. So common questions for the program officer when you chat with them. Start with questions about the alignment of your work with the funding mechanism. Say, does my project represent a good fit? Is it competitive? Does it advance your funding priorities? Are there other, grants within your agency that would be a better fit? But now's the time to sort of find that out. And then turn to questions that solicit their insights and feedback. So what are your recommendations for improving the competitiveness of this work? What are the most common causes for proposals being declined for this opportunity? And kind of finish with summary questions. What are the usual success rates for this program? How would you prefer that I contact you if you have additional questions? And then follow up afterwards, as if it were a job interview. Thank them for their time, summarizing the key points. You can always reference your call and any further communication about the opportunity, and use the subject line of your email to reflect the purpose and urgency of the request. And I think it's usually best to start this process several months before the deadline, to kind of give them a sense that you are being considerate of the deadline, and you're not sort of rushing through things at the last minute. So I'll share this. There's some different resources here on how to contact program officers from some other institutions. So after this preamble is out of the way, which is sort of lengthy, but I think a really important part of the grant writing process, can turn to the writing the proposal itself. So when you prepare the proposal, take stock of all the funder requirements. There'll be guidelines that you can refer to. You want to work with ORES to prepare a checklist for all required application elements, and that's something that I can really sort of do for you. There'll be a list that is pretty standard. At a place like the National Science Foundation, it's always going to be the same thing. You're going to prepare a project summary, a project description, a budget, ancillary documents like a biosketch, other items. So that's something we can work on together, and I can provide as well. So note required timelines and deadlines, create a grant development plan, including a timeline, gather required information, draft the proposal documents, get feedback from your colleagues if you can, and refine those documents. You can also get that feedback from me, and then submit the grant well ahead of the application deadline to prevent any kind of last minute stress or rush. So if anything is unclear, reach out to me or the program officer as soon as possible, so you can have a kind of troubleshoot in advance of issues. Grant proposal development deadline timeline could look something like this. We also put together one, but it's basically, you're sort of thinking about who's doing what by when. Uh, it's sort of like a good sort of guidance document as you work on your grant documents. So elements of a grant proposal vary widely according to funders, but the standard application package includes some standard informational forms. That's usually institutional information about the new school, and those are items that I can assist with or complete for you. An abstract or summary of your project, a narrative description of your proposed project, budget, and a narrative description of the budget elements is pretty standard. I can assist with the budget that you put together, working in coordination with you, and then the budget director of your school will approve that before submission. Then documents describing applicant qualifications and resources, so like a CV, maybe a letter of support from the provost or your dean, saying that they'll support this project. Documents describing collaboration plans and agreements if you are working with another organization outside of the new school, and then attachments or appendices supporting your project narrative. So your proposal should communicate your project clearly and appropriately. Tips for proposal development: know your audience, know who you're writing for, know who the reviewers are going to be. Write clearly in an appropriate style. Try to avoid jargon if you can. Use SMART goals when describing your work. So specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. Those are sort of a good way to structure your work plan. Employ skillful repetition and emphasis. Make sure all your documents tell a coherent story. So your budget should match your project narrative. You should not be promising something in one thing that is not being reflected in another. And then seek feedback from peers and grant professionals. And then refine and edit. Above all, give yourself plenty of time. While the narrative project description is the heart of the proposal, other documents may require significant time and energy. So yeah, just be aware, a project description to the NSF is 15 pages long, is the maximum, but there's also a number of other documents that need to be prepared. Data management and sharing plan, postdoctoral mentoring plan, a facilities documents. These are all things that can take time to put together. So good proposals come from good concepts. Strong narratives answer core questions clearly and succinctly. What do you want to do? How much will it cost? And how much time will it take? I mean, I think can't really be understated that if possible, you want to state within if not the first sentence, the first paragraph, certainly what you're going to do and how you will do it. I think, I have worked with a grant seeker in the past who really wanted to start with an anecdote in a way that might have been persuasive or might have been good to read in something like an essay. But this is a grant is really different than that. You want to sort of say right at the beginning, so the reviewers will have a very clear idea what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. You also want to talk about how the proposed project relates to the sponsor's interests. What difference will the project make to your institution, your students, your discipline, community, nation, wider stakeholders? What has already been done in the field and how your project advance that work? And how do you plan to implement and accomplish project goals and outcomes? And then also, how will you evaluate the results of what you do? So how will you know that you succeeded in your research project? What kind of metrics are you using to judge the success of your project? And then you want to say why you should, rather than someone else, be selected to do this work and be funded for it. So most proposals are now submitted electronically, although some smaller foundations may still request paper proposals. In my experience, everything has been electronic. So a typical online application process includes the completion of eligibility checks and prerequisites, registration in the funder's online system. For for public funders that are going to be making awards to the new school, we're already registered in the grants.gov, which is the federal government's site for granting. Also in sam.gov. So we have the necessary registrations. That's all handled. And then completion of form fields in the online system. So part of my role is actually completing any kind of electronic application on behalf of a faculty member here. So I'll sort of handle that aspect of it. I'll upload all the required attachments once you have a final draft that you're happy with. And then I'll actually press the button to submit. So, that's sort of all handled. It's sort of not something that you really will have to worry about. So supporting documents, these are essential for competitive grants. Supporting documents provide key information on your applicant qualifications and resources. So your CV is really gonna, or your bio sketch, which is the formal, is the form that NIH and NSF use, where you can really sort of speak to your work in the field and why you'd be sort of qualified to do the work. But those are all also going to make the case for why you're qualified to do this project. If it's an agreement with your dean or with an outside organization to conduct the work, it's going to show that the plans and contracts are in place to implement the project. Lets the funder know how you're going to use the money and allow the funder to judge the applicant capacity and the care that they put into the project. So you want to know your funding landscape. There's federal agencies, state agencies, local agencies. There's also foundations, corporations, associations. You want to just kind of familiarize yourself with the whole range of public and private funding. Just, whether that's sort of through a Google search, through looking at major funding agencies and what they've funded before, just kind of familiarize yourself with who's been making grants in your area. And then you want to sort of design your long-term strategy, articulate your long-term goals in research or creative practice. Think about what the role of funding is going to be in achieving your goals, and then map out an ideal grant funding trajectory based on that, and then make a plan to stay on track and build competitiveness. Work the plan and then revisit the plan and revise as necessary. Some other resources for proposal development. Once we share the slides, you can use these. The National Organization for Research Development Professionals has a grant writing 101 page. Foundation Center for Private Foundations has a proposal writing short course. NSF has a proposal and award policy and procedure guide, which is indispensable if you are going to apply to them. And then also the NIH offers guidance on writing an application.